Hiya, good evening and welcome. We're going to, well, first of all, little message. It's a full moon in 2 days. The feral child's kicking off. So if you hear any screaming, that's her. Unfortunately, the sound will be coming towards where my microphone is angled. So apologies for that in advance. Hopefully you won't be able to hear her. She seems to be running out of steam at the moment, but she's been going for a good couple of hours now. So I thought today we would start off with the issue in Northern Ireland with the DUP predictably refusing not only to form an executive but to even help nominate a speaker, which basically just knackers the assembly. So usual thing, we'll discuss this topic first, and then, you know, for the poor buggers who try and watch this later, so there's some sort of structure, and then we'll go on to some more general questions later on. Can we come up with an alternative name for acronym for the DUP? Well, I mean, you do get this all the time, don't you? It's always a bit of a worry for any I would say it's good advice for any political organisation. Don't condense your name down to an acronym, because you're asking for trouble. The best one I've ever come across, someone describing them as doesn't understand politics, because, you know, without actually just trying to be rude, I don't go out of my way to be rude to people, but ultimately that's quite accurate. The thing with the DUP is they clearly don't understand politics. They campaigned, never mind the fact that they campaigned against the Good Friday Agreement, right? And now they're trying to use it as some sort of argument against the protocol, because that's just their ideology. But they campaigned for Brexit. Now what are they belly aching about? The consequences of Brexit. Now, it's not their intended consequences of Brexit, but it's a bit like, I was just looking at a thing on Twitter, some caller to LBC who voted for Brexit, a business owner by the sounds of it. I haven't looked into the details, but they voted for Brexit for less bureaucracy, so less red tape. They were told, oh, you have less red tape. Now they've got their goods stuck at the border. And it's like, oh, what happened? It's like, you voted for it. You didn't mean to. It's not the consequence you meant to vote for, but it's the consequence you're always going to get. DUP, it's the same thing anyway. You know, if you are going to vote for Brexit... Now, campaigning for Brexit could, in theory, have just meant leaving membership, but you retain access. You're still in the customs union single market. That was possible, and in fact, that's what the Brexit... Well, they didn't campaign for the customs union. They did campaign to remain in the single market. That changed very quickly, though. And what's more, a lot of people said it will mean leaving the single market. Brexiteers went, no, it won't. Yeah, it will. You want us to leave the single market. We know that. And if you leave the single market, and there's a similar thing for leaving a customs union, but if you leave a single market, you need a standards border. Now, Theresa May had this wizard idea that, I'll tell you what, we'll have this backstop, which means that we'll maintain our arrangements as if we'd still be basically in the single market and customs union until such time as we can come up with a solution that means we can leave without this trade friction. That was the plan for Northern Ireland. But, you know, the Brexiteers didn't like that, so it didn't happen. And it was never going to happen. So let's have a look. I'm going to have to focus on this one. Oh yeah, John Steele saying that, of course, DUP took their salaries. They need to pay for their staple. Yeah, I mean, this was particularly, it is particularly abhorrent. So the DUP MLAs, I mean, first of all, let's consider what the DUP promised going into these Stormont elections. First of all, Jeffrey Donaldson, the leader of the DUP, said that he would take his seat in Stormont. Right? Now he's trying to argue by saying, yeah, I'll still take my seat in Stormont, but when the protocol's out of the way. That last clause wasn't in their campaign, was it? Am I wrong? I don't think that was in their campaign. And then the other thing they campaigned, they had this 5-point plan, which included, amongst other things, free childcare, so many hours of free childcare and stuff like that. And it's like, but you can't give people this unless Stormont is assembled. and they are so they've broken their campaign promises. You know, they promised that they would form the executive. They promised domestic policies that require the Assembly to form. They also admittedly promised not to form the Assembly unless the protocol was changed as well. You know, but that's like saying one thing to one group of people, another thing to another group of people. So to then troop in, sign the register so that they get paid, and then bugger off is, you know. But it shouldn't. It also shouldn't happen. Stormont should. I don't like. There may be a really good reason why Stormont works like this. So for those who don't know, unlike a normal legislative assembly, there may be others that are like this. I don't know. You know, but the two. Well, I say the two main parties. It'd be very weird if the Alliance Party was one of the two main parties. I'm not sure how that works, because in theory, it's supposed to be the two main parties are supposed to be the main Republican Party or Nationalist Party is a better way of describing it these days, and the main Unionist Party form this sort of twin emperor type situation. And if one of them doesn't take their seats, the whole thing collapses, which is a bit. There may be a really good reason why they did it like that, but I for the life of me, don't know what it is, because I know it's in hindsight, but it sounds like it was asking for trouble. I suppose when they were coming up with the rules for it, well, not everyone was fully on board. The DUP were not fully on board, but the DUP were not the largest unionist party at the time. It was the UUP. So maybe no one really foresaw this. But then Sinn Féin also collapsed the Assembly. I mean, bear in mind, at the moment, Sinn Féin are going, oh, this is disgraceful, the DUP have collapsed and all the rest of it. And it's like, well, yeah. But you're saying that now because politically, you're fine with Stormont being as it is. You're in the ascendancy. But a few years ago, it was a different matter. So neither one is better than the other. But I do feel sorry for the people of Northern Ireland, because at the end of the day, it, you know, either you think that Stormont does important work and therefore preventing it from functioning is bad for people, or you don't. And if you do think it's bad whoever collapses it. DUP also prevented women from voting, having safe abortion rights, and many other incredibly sexist attitudes that were alive and kicking in the 70s, but now it's the 21st century. Well, I mean, this is the thing. They're very much like the Republicans in the United States, aren't they? We have them everywhere. These conservatives or libertarians, as sometimes if you're far enough across, you may describe them. But these far-right conservatives exist everywhere. Not every country has them in positions of power. But anyway. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. Some questions. Main headline Northern Ireland elections was Sinn Féin coming first with no extra seats, but I thought the key thing was the non-sectarian Alliance Party. Yeah, it absolutely was. Because you're right, Sinn Féin didn't gain any more seats, and what's more, they didn't really. Their vote share would increase by 1%, which was an increase, but by 1%. So Sinn Féin increased their vote share by 1% and got the same seats. And yet that was the new, and it was, to be honest though, it is historic because, you know, never mind how it happened, and of course how it happened was collapse of the DUP vote, but it is still historic because at the end of the day, as people have pointed out, Northern Ireland was set up, and you know, maybe there was some genuine reasons for it. There were probably a great deal of reasons that weren't at all genuine, but it was set up in order to say, look, you know, there's people in Ireland that want to remain part of the UK, and there's a load of people that don't. And really, it should have been one or the other, but it wasn't for whatever reason. So they did the partition to have a pro-unionist section of Ireland. And so this is the first time where you've had the major party being a nationalist party. But there you go. James, they're saying Sinn Féin don't take their seats in Westminster. Westminster still works. Yeah, I mean, in reality, of course, they don't have enough seats to, like, even if you had a quorum type thing to create a problem. But yeah, this is absolutely true. Sinn Féin have a policy of not taking their seats in Westminster, and the system doesn't collapse if a group of MPs doesn't take their seats. but also, I mean, with Sinn Féin that wouldn't happen because they would never be the major party anyway. But let's say, like some people say, for example, with Boris Johnson's lies in Westminster, really quick tangent, and they say things like, well, why doesn't Keir Starmer stand up and say this is all lies, and then him and all his Labour MPs troop out of the debating chamber? And the answer is because it would do no good. It would get on the news, it'd be a big show. What would it achieve? Nothing. Parliament would still carry on. If all those Labour MPs just left the chamber, they'd just carry on with their normal business. Only Labour wouldn't be there to make their points, ask their questions. So that would be pointless because it would just carry on. You know, sometimes you even get debates where the Conservatives don't turn up. The debates still have, there have been a couple of recent debates where Conservative MPs, maybe there's been one or two, but largely they haven't turned up because it's been on something they don't want to talk about. DUP had no intention of ever playing second fiddle to Republicans, or just as Donaldson had no intention of quitting as an MP. Well, this is the thing. I don't know whether people have noticed now. I saw a comment from someone. This wasn't a member of the DUP, but it was a political commentator who I think is affiliated with, like, they're like me with Labour. I think they're supporters of the DUP, and how they described the position, because they were talking about the fact that Sir Geoffrey Donaldson was not appointing a deputy first minister, but they didn't call it a deputy first minister, they called it a joint first minister. And you know, in terms of what it is, it's sort of true. You know, that the first minister and the deputy first minister are of equal power, so you can, you know, describe it as a joint first minister, but they never used to describe it like that when they had the first minister position, did they? They didn't call it joint first minister then, and they didn't call the deputy first minister the joint first minister, as far as I know, either. But anyway, Edwin Poots is a young Earth creationist who thinks the planet is 6,000 years old. Yeah, I know. Yeah. But anyway, the only reason it was done like this was to facilitate Paisley, now deceased, Paisley Senior this is, working with McGuinness. Quite right, Sinn Féin previously collapsed Stormont. No, it wasn't. Both are archaic, but then who are we to talk? It was never right. If the assembly is there to serve the people. If you've got a beef with something that someone's done, and I'm not saying Sinn Féin didn't have a genuine grievance, but at the end of the day, it's not a reason to collapse the assembly. If you've got a grievance, you pursue it. If you can't, do you know what? That's politics. That's just politics. You know, at the moment, Labour are not happy about the way the Conservatives are financially ruining this country. Doesn't give them the right to try and frustrate the workings of Parliament. Quite frankly, at the moment, Parliament has very few functions because Boris Johnson keeps centralising power. But also back to the Alliance part here. Also, Alliance won by consolidating moderate voters from SDLP, Green and UUP. DUP vote was split by the TUV. Yes, the TUV got a huge increase in vote share, absolutely massive. They still just got one seat though. But you know, that's the nature of it. It's not really. It's a. You know, this is why I say it's more proportionally representative, but it's not actual proportional representation in the real sense. Found out, but again, the TUV are demonstrating there the damage you do from their point of view with disunity. What are the TUV? The TUV are the bits of the DUP that did not approve of power sharing with Sinn Féin. That's it. That's all they disagree on, isn't it? That's it. That was their major beef. That is the only difference between the TUV and the DUP. So because they disagreed on this one petty thing, I would say, but they disagreed on a thing, they don't think it's petty. As a result of that, they've massively reduced their power. Now, as I keep trying to say to people, the purpose of a political party, a mainstream political party, is to achieve power. That's its fundamental role. Obviously, when you get that power, then there are various other principles within the party that you're supposed to pursue, which is why we have different political parties, because they have different ideas about what are the priority principles. But fundamentally, it's the job of the party machine to win power. And you work against this if you disunite. Any party will, you know. But anyway. Sinn Féin will not take their seats because it involves swearing allegiance to the Queen, thus entirely against one of their main political positions. Yeah, we know the reasons why. You know, it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things here. I think it's a ridiculous position to take, because the SNP have a much more mature position, I would argue. They want Scotland to leave the UK, but they don't want to destroy what's left of the UK. They want to be very good friends. They just want to be neighbours rather than part of the same household. That's all. You know, and Sinn Féin could have taken the same view. Could forcing a hard border in Ireland stir up IRA again? I don't think no one would. I think that's the first thing to say. In fact, I think that's what the Brexiteers think is their trump card, that no one would install the international law dictates if you do not have that trade border between Northern Ireland and Britain, it must be moved between Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland. Nobody would do it. The Republic of Ireland would not do it. The UK would not do it. Nobody would do it. But by law, it has to be done. And this is what Brexiteers think is their trump card, that, well, we'll just get rid of the border in the Irish Sea. If Ireland want to install this border between Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland, let them. The DUP think that is what would happen. It isn't. I don't know what would happen, but at the moment it doesn't matter. It would have been a very serious problem had we... This is why the ERG and the Tory party wanted us to leave the EU without a deal. They didn't want a withdrawal agreement. So that if we didn't have a withdrawal agreement, the Conservatives would never have installed a trade border inside the UK. So that's what they wanted. That's the outcome they wanted. They didn't care what happened. The DUP actively want a hard border between Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland. ERG, I don't think they really care. But the fact of the matter is we do have a withdrawal agreement. So now there are international repercussions if we break that treaty. We know that the EU will at the very least impose a load of politically sensitive tariffs, very damaging ones. They're very good at that. They could easily dissolve the entire trade and cooperation agreement. The United States is getting ready to send over an envoy specifically for Northern Ireland, but they are sending over officials to monitor the situation on the ground. Obviously, from America's point of view, it'll be very much like a load of children saying Johnny did this, no, Sally did that. So they will want to make sure they've got someone on the ground knowing exactly what's going on. Because you've got to remember, from the United States point of view, people will point to the fact that Joe Biden, Irish American, the Irish lobby in America, very powerful. Yes, it is. But they also act in their own interests. You know, and it's not a case of them taking the EU side over the UK. They generally have done because the EU is a more powerful partner. Really as simple as that. They're not acting out of principle. They're acting out of, their own national interest, which is what a government should do. You know, but we don't know what the United States would do about it. I know people keep coming up with all sorts of things that the US would do based on what they could do. But we don't know what they'll do because they haven't threatened any specific action. They've just wagged their finger. But it may well be that the United States doesn't have to do anything other than wag its finger, because the EU, if they wanted, could bring trade to a complete standstill if they wanted to. Signing or accepting the Good Friday Agreement should be a requirement for being able to stand in Northern Ireland and wider UK elections. Yeah, I mean, this is a constitutional question, isn't it? Obviously that doesn't exist. As someone said earlier, with Sinn Féin not taking the seats in Westminster, it's because you swear allegiance to the Crown, and they won't do that. You could have a similar thing as Stormont. Obviously, when the Assembly was set up as part of the Good Friday Agreement, it was trying to be very, very inclusive, and they were trying to be inclusive with a load of disparate tribes that really didn't trust each other. So I don't think it would have been realistic that you could have put something in like that. And probably even now, it'd be very difficult. I mean, what I would say, and people in Northern Ireland can tell me what they feel it's like on the ground, is the impression I am getting, though, is that people even in unionist communities are not impressed with what the DUP are doing. Now, I do know, if we get rid of this one, this is from the Times today, which I suppose will be published in the Sunday Times tomorrow. So Boris Johnson's heading out to Northern Ireland. Apparently he's going to try and do some good. But this is what it says. I'll read it out to you. I'm not entirely convinced by this. So it says Boris Johnson is to hold talks with unionist leaders in Northern Ireland on Monday in an attempt to persuade them to allow the province's new assembly to get up and running. Yesterday, the DUP blocked the election of a speaker at Stormont Assembly, which would leave the devolved legislature unable to function. Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, the party's leader, said the move was designed to send a clear message to the EU and the UK government about the need to resolve issues with the Northern Ireland Protocol. Johnson is due to meet Donaldson and Michelle O'Neill, the leader of Sinn Féin. He will brief them, this is the bit, he will brief them on the government's plan to introduce legislation that would override parts of the protocol in EU law. I don't know why it says that, because he can't change anything in EU law. I think they mean UK law. And allow goods to be sent to the province without checks. A government source said they believe the move would be enough to allow the DUP to partially back down and agree to nominate a speaker. However, they are unlikely to nominate a deputy first minister that would allow full-scale power sharing to resume. Now, here's the thing. Let's say this is what Boris Johnson tries to do tomorrow. We can instantly see what would happen. Boris Johnson toddles along and he goes to Sir Geoffrey Donaldson. Now, bear in mind, this legislation, the government threatened it before, and then Brandon Lewis, the Northern Ireland Secretary, when he was asked about it, said, oh, there's these rumours you're going to put this in the Queen's speech. He says, no, we're not. And they didn't put it in the Queen's speech. So that implies that it's not a priority for the UK government. So bear in mind that Boris Johnson, known liar, and who's already fooled the DUP and then betrayed them several times, is going to go to the DUP and say, look, I'm going to put this legislation in, right? I know I didn't say it in the Queen's speech, so it's not a top priority, but I'm going to put in this legislation that will allow us to override parts of the protocol and then prevent any checks on stuff passing from Britain to Northern Ireland. And that's going to get the DUP to nominate a speaker, they reckon. What's going to be the reaction from Michelle O'Neill when he says that to her? Because, you know, it's one of these things. The DUP say they will happily engage with the Assembly if the protocol is removed. Well, Sinn Féin could take the view, but if you scrap the protocol, that's against the will of the people. We will collapse the Assembly now. But it may well be that Boris Johnson and the Conservatives in general will take the view that if the Assembly has to be collapsed, better for Sinn Féin to collapse it, because they don't want to be pally with Sinn Féin, they don't care about them, than the DUP, who are supposed to be their cousins. But anyway, I may have missed a load of comments there when I was waffling on there. Is it really as significant that the union side is splintering, with DUP support going to the official lot and TUV as well as Alliance, and they're still bigger than nationalists? Well, again, you know, how many people in Northern Ireland really now will identify as nationalist or unionist? I think a lot of people now just want to get on with life, really. But technically, as it stands, in terms of how you can measure it, I know some people will say things like, if you look at the vote share, it sort of looks like still higher for unionist than nationalist, but it's you could sort of wonder, with those who vote for the Alliance, you may get people who identify as unionist or nationalist voting for the Alliance Party as well. You may imagine that more of them are one than the other. I don't really know, but in terms of the seats, there's a majority that are unionist at the moment still, but that's because the Alliance Party don't identify as either, and arguably don't want either. What impact do I think the situation will have on Sinn Féin within the Irish public? None at all. They do their own thing. None at all. Sinn Féin in the Republic of Ireland are not even like the same party, are they? You know, Sinn Féin in Northern Ireland is a Conservative party. Sinn Féin in the Republic of Ireland is the closest thing you've got to a mainstream Social Democrat party, really. You know, they tend to lean further to the left. Now, I don't know. Again, people can tell me. I don't know enough about it. I've never lived in Ireland, any part of Ireland. I do not know if that is because Sinn Féin in Northern Ireland is fundamentally very different to Sinn Féin in the Republic of Ireland, because their policies are very, very different. Or if it's just strategic. You know, at the end of the day, you don't really have a mainstream left-wing party in the Republic of Ireland, as a mainstream, as in can realistically form a government. So do Sinn Féin try and occupy that niche for support? I don't know. Have no impact on Sinn Féin in the Republic of Ireland, may as well be a separate party. Well, indeed, it is, isn't it? It may as well be a separate party. I mean, you do have slight different, you know, some differences in this. Like if you look at Scottish Conservatives, they're a little bit different to the National Conservative Party, but they're still very, very similar. They're very similar policies. You know, I think it's sometimes the identity politics that's different. The same thing with Scottish Labour and Welsh Labour and the National Labour Party. But with Sinn Féin, they are really different. If you look at their policies, they're really different. So I absolutely agree. I actually wonder what would happen. Now, if you think about reunification, now, like I keep saying, and it's not just me that says this. I mean, I wouldn't know. But, you know, reunification of Ireland wouldn't be, the day it happens, it wouldn't be like, okay, that's it, there's no more Northern Ireland. That's not. There will still be a Northern Ireland. It's just that Northern Ireland will be a part of a unified Ireland as opposed to part of the UK. But the mechanisms will still exist for a while. At least, you know, presumably you'll try and move towards normalising the situation. But to begin with, it won't work, will it? You can't just dissolve Stormont and the MLAs and say, right, you're going to have elections to elect someone for the Dáil, can you? That won't work. So, but when you get to that situation and people start thinking of it, how would Sinn Féin work in what is now Northern Ireland, and at the, you know, after that point would be just different counties in Ireland? That would be really weird. Boris is going to Northern Ireland to sell London Bridge to the DUP. Yeah, well, it will be interesting to see if they believe it at all, because it's like, how many times have the DUP believed Boris Johnson, and then he's gone, no, I was only kidding, mate. I had my fingers crossed behind my back, didn't I? But anyway, polls suggest that people in Northern Ireland do not want a border poll. Only 30% support United Ireland, say it's up to them. It is entirely up to them. But the bottom line is, no one right now believes that a border poll is imminent. Sinn Féin are, in terms of mainstream parties, are the one that's most on, we want a border poll. But even they say 5 to 10 years. And they know that. They know there's no realistic prospect of a border poll within the next 5 years. Because on what basis would you have it? In all honesty, on what basis would you have it? You would need there to be, at the very least, and this wouldn't be the only condition, at the very least you would need to say there should be more nationalist MLAs than unionist ones. And I do not know why, for the life of me, the Conservatives in Westminster don't just say that. You know, whenever the Northern Ireland Secretary, whoever it is, at the moment it's Brandon Lewis, is ever asked about this thing, they have to try and sound like, oh, you know, the people don't want this. It may be true, probably is true at the moment. But at the same time, it's so easy a question to answer. All you have to do is say, by law, because it's perfectly true, by law, if you're the Northern Ireland Secretary, you say, by law, I have to give consideration to issuing a border poll if I believe there is a credible chance of it delivering a vote in favour of reunification of the island of Ireland. That's what the Good Friday Agreement says. So all you have to do is say, so there'll be numerous metrics that will inform that decision, but number one has to be more nationalist MLAs in Stormont than unionist ones, and then the problem's gone. You can, the problem is gone. But anyway, I might be missing a lot of, I might be also deliberately ignoring certain comments as well. I sense an argument in this thread which illustrates the feeling I have that the rest of the UK residents don't really understand the politics or society or history of Northern Ireland. No, we absolutely don't. People in this country, and the same will apply in Ireland as well, there's an awful lot of blinkered thinking everywhere. But the fact of the matter is, people in Britain are not taught about our history, right? We're not taught about our history with Ireland at any part. We're not taught about our imperial history. When I went to school, and bear in mind, so when I did GCSEs may vary a little bit in terms of how to talk, but the national curriculum is the same. GCSEs are based on the national curriculum, right? And that was set in like the 80s or something before I became a teacher, and it hasn't changed since. So when I did history, you did all the, you know, medieval stuff, the kings and queens and the stuff like that, and you might have heard of Henry VIII and his naughtiness, but by the time it got to Imperial Britain, which was mostly what we talked about for GCSE, that was the main topic, but we didn't do Imperialist Britain. We did the Industrial Revolution. So that's what we did. We did all this massive shipbuilding and all these great feats of engineering, and yeah, we did some of the bad sides about life in Britain, like some of the terrible working conditions for workers in Britain, but we didn't do foreign policy. You don't get taught about it. If you want to know anything about history, and I would say there's a lot of countries, I'm not going to say all countries by any means, there are a lot of countries that try and give their population a biased view, and that'll apply in lots of places. But if you want to learn about history, you do have to read about it yourself, and you also have to read about history and accept that the person you're reading may also be biased. So you need to read a broad range of history. Like, for example, if you wanted to read the history of Britain's relationship with Ireland, you would need to read history books written in Britain and history books written in Ireland. It's really that simple. You're not going to learn it in school. Rather than a united Ireland, perhaps a more attainable outcome might be a separate and independent Northern Ireland. This could happen if the Unionists come to believe they've no real allies in GB. See, I'm not a favour of that. See, in everything, disunity is weakness. So, and I don't think anyone wants that anyway. So that actually serves nobody any good. Northern Ireland has a population of like 1 million people, right? A bit over 1 million people. Why would it want to be on its own? It puts it in a much weaker position. You know, sometimes you end up with countries splitting up because the cultural differences are really huge, which is a shame, because the larger you are, the more power you have in any context. Doesn't matter where it is. You know, if you work together, you achieve more than you can achieve on your own. So whenever, you know, a country splits off from a larger country and goes it alone, and sometimes there are reasons for doing that, but economically it doesn't win. It may win culturally, as I say, you know, Ireland, for example, or most of Ireland leaving the UK, you could sort of see that, you know, there was too much bad blood. So you could see that, and on balance, that was the decision that had to be made. It was unsustainable otherwise. And this is why I always think that partition in Ireland was unsustainable. Like, it's nothing to do with me. It's for the people of Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, to decide whether they want Ireland to reunify or not. It's not me. I don't live there. I've never been there. I've got no family there. But just from an objective point of view, it just seems that partition, if 100 years later, it's still causing so much aggro that politics in Northern Ireland is poisoned by this sectarianism. Partition hasn't worked, has it? Whereas I think to myself, if partition had never happened, if it was a case of saying to Ireland, do you want to leave the UK? If you do, you're all leaving the UK. Yes or no? And it would have been yes. You would you would think it was actually quite tight in the end, wasn't it? Even just, but anyway, at some point that would have happened surely. I think by now, after several generations, and it's outside of living memory pretty much, there might be the odd person. No, actually, surely no one actually in Ireland remembers it. There might technically be someone alive at the time, but as a baby. But by and large, it's out of living memory, right? By now, life would have sorted itself out, surely. So I just see it like that. Right, so John there saying, why would Northern Ireland, Scotland, or any sane person wish to be part of this crazy Westminster? Well, that's the thing, isn't it? We're looking at the broad brush of history, and then you're looking at one little bit that's messed up, right? Absolutely messed up. But that's a here and now. That's fixable. You could get that anywhere. 50 years' time, you might end up with raging populism in the Republic of Ireland, which may just be Ireland then, I don't know. and they end up going down the path to fascism. There's nothing stopping it. They may do that. Well then, do you then leave Ireland? Do people in Northern Ireland go, oh no, it's crazy here now, and Britain's a beacon of like, enlightenment. Let's go back. No, that'd be silly. Can't do the hokey cokey with countries, even though Germany did do it a little bit. But so you wouldn't look at one little period of a country. At the end of the day, there are practical reasons why I would say, on balance, reunification just makes, in terms of looking ahead. Because what I don't like the DUP, I don't like the TUV, I don't like Sinn Féin. I don't even like the SDLP and the UUP, because I don't like the idea of political parties who obviously have lots of other policies as well, but they're united by division. I don't like that. I want political parties that disagree on fundamental aspects of what's best for people, but ultimately what they want is what's best for people. Now, yeah, we don't have that in Britain either because of the Conservative Party, but that's that. But it's and the only way I can see of getting rid of it is reunification. Partition is never going to achieve this, is it? Doesn't make sense. But anyway, we're getting on to all sorts of European history here. Let me just scan up and see if we've put in here. Labour should affirm its commitment to the Good Friday Agreement, refocus public attention to the need for Bodger's Lot alone to fix the mess arising from what they sold to the public. I don't think Labour have ever, in fact, they have actually reaffirmed their commitment to the Good Friday Agreement. I don't think that's ever been in doubt. They were recently celebrating it. Recently we had the anniversary of the 25th anniversary of Labour coming to power, where very much the Labour Party were selling their role in the Good Friday Agreement. So that has been very much done. In fact, Labour not that long ago we celebrated the 20th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. I mean, that was under Jeremy Corbyn, but still, that's Labour, showing its commitment to the Good Friday Agreement. That's not in doubt. In terms of saying the idea of saying, look, this is Boris Johnson's mess and he needs to sort it, I would say yes, in terms of he needs to take responsibility. But I think there is a danger when you just say this is the government's problem, they need to deal with it. If you're trying to be the government in waiting, you also need your own solutions, don't you? So Labour do also need to be able to say to people, we've got a plan for this. All I would say on that score is just thinking strategically, and it goes back to what we were saying there about people in Britain basically don't understand Northern Ireland, which also means it's not a big vote winner one way or the other, because people don't understand and if we're honest, don't really care. and all people are hearing at the moment. So I put a comment on there. Someone was saying on some, it may have even been Question Time or something on the BBC, and someone saying, an Englishman saying, well, we should just get rid of Northern Ireland if this is the problem then. And this is inevitably the way it goes, right? So Brexiteers and the media in this country who control the narrative on Brexit, the biggest problem with Brexit in terms of trade and in terms of agro in general is the massive trade barriers between GB and the EU, right? That's the biggest problem. Problems between GB and Northern Ireland are a shadow, because yes, there are checks going from GB to Northern Ireland, but not the other way around. And those checks going from GB to Northern Ireland are nowhere near as tight as the checks going from GB to the EU. Nowhere near. And the restrictions are nowhere near as tight either. So the issues over the Northern Ireland Protocol, which are real, there are some issues, nothing like the issues of trade between GB and the EU. But the media keeps banging on about them as if they are. So inevitably, if you're someone who gets your information from the mainstream media and you're in, say, England, let's say, what are you going to think? You just keep hearing all these Brexit problems associated with Northern Ireland. Apparently there's no problem with our trade with France or the Netherlands or Belgium or anything like that, because you don't ever hear about it. Occasionally you see some queues. Apparently that's the EU's fault as well, France being awkward. But the only thing you constantly hear about is problems with Northern Ireland. So inevitably you'll think to yourself, well, let's just get rid of Northern Ireland then. So you create this situation, the Brexiteers create this situation where people in Britain think, yeah, let's just chop off that bit of the UK and give it back to Ireland. But anyway. Hang on, have I missed something? The SNP started to gain ground when Margaret Thatcher launched the poll tax unilaterally in Scotland, which was against the constitution and was eventually defeated when it was introduced in England. Yeah, there was some right. Yeah, we used to protest then. What happened? Why don't we do that now? But anyway, I don't know. I think people's spirits just got broken over Brexit, you know. Because I do, you know, there's a lot of people thinking, how come people in this country aren't protesting? And I will sometimes say things like, well, you know, in this country, we tend to grumble over our cornflakes and we don't really protest a lot. But we do sometimes protest. We protested over the poll tax. Huge protests. And yet, we don't over anything that's happened in the last few years. And I think the Conservatives have actually just broken everyone's spirit. But anyway. Hi Tushan. Yes, we are indeed talking about politics. Right, well, we have moved on to the last quarter of an hour, so we can do some other questions, I suppose. I have just seen one, which we'd better do, I suppose. So Saintly Starmer, guessing, damn, you're not a fan. Cannot even support London Mayor investigation of decriminalisation of cannabis. No, of course not. And you know why? Because at the end of the day, like I said earlier, I don't really hear for it earlier, the job of a political party is to get power, right? In government, then you govern for everyone. But in a campaign or in opposition, your one goal is to achieve power. Now, Starmer knows, just like everyone else, that he's targeting a very small number of voters. All he needs is it'd be lovely if he could get millions of extra votes at the next election compared to the last election. It's not going to happen. And even if it did, it would make no difference if they were all spread out. He needs a few thousand people in 100 seats, ideally. It will never be, if it was 100 seats, it'd be brilliant. But, you know, targeting about 180 to 100 seats, he wants a few thousand more people to vote Labour. That's it. That's all he wants. And it's he knows the profile of those people he's targeting, and they're not the people, you know, they're the people you'll go about, legalising cannabis. They go, oh no, I've read something in the Daily Mail, that doesn't sound good to me. Never mind the fact that the current cabinet are probably as high as kites half the time. Doesn't matter. It's politics. That's what politics is. You know, at the end of the day, you can support a political leader being honest, like what we would call honest, Because there's what I call honesty and political honesty. You know, political honesty, I think, is where you promise to do a load of things and you do them. It doesn't mean always telling the truth, right? So you can be completely honest and say exactly what you believe and not win power, and then you let, you know, the Satanists in. Or you can pay attention to the people you need to get on side to win power and get on their side. Because the way I look at it, if you look at, like, and I keep saying this, you look at like 20 policies. Let's say you're in favour of 20 policies, things that you think would really turn this country around, really be good for the country. And you say to some people, right, here, these are your 20 policies, right? This party is promising to deliver 10 of them. And this other party is promising to deliver none of them, right? Which one do you vote for? And there's some people go, neither of them, because I only want the one that's promising these 20. Well, then you get the one who's delivering none. Now you ask that question of me and I will go, well, 10's better than none. For me, politics is all about the maths. 10 is better than none. So I'll go with the 10. But anyway, let us have a look. The world we're used to is coming to an end. Political disruptions, economic crashes, environmental degradation and population falls. Peter Zahn explains geopolitics, demographics and futures. Oh, is this another channel you talk about? Those things are certainly all true. You know, the world is going to enter a new era. It can't not. It absolutely can't not. You could add into there, so political disruptions, I mean, that happens all the time anyway. I mean, that's just par for the course. Economic crashes, arguably will be more likely just because of the way these things are managed now. Environmental degradation, inevitably, because we're not doing enough to deal with it. Population falls is another big one, of course. Japan, advanced stage of this, aren't they? Massive elderly population and a young workforce that can't possibly cope with it. So what do? They work their young workers like absolute dogs, and you have massive mental health problems. Inevitably, other countries will have to follow that economic model if they don't do something pronto. And by do something, what I actually mean is start looking at how we're distributing wealth. But I would also add into there, you know, we talk about the COVID pandemic and it's like a once in a century thing. No, it ain't. No, it ain't. You know, what allowed the COVID pandemic to spread is the fact that it's so easy to travel the world now. So, and it happens, not just that it's easy, that it happens such a lot. So inevitably outbreaks are going to become more common. And the reason why we're still stuck with it is because the world some parts of the world may put in some really good efforts for a while, but they can't sustain it if the rest of the world doesn't catch up. But we also know that there will be parts of the world who will not do what they need to do, and so we end up where we are now. The harm reduction from total state control of illegal drugs would be huge. This has been known for ages in certain professions I've worked in, but not a vote winner. Well, that is ultimately the thing. You have to look at priorities. Is it a top priority? It's not. It's, for me, it's important that you don't rule things out for, like, I can't understand the people who rule things out like CBD oil for medicinal purposes. It's absolutely fine for and you can get it for medicinal purposes, you know. But when it comes to recreational drugs, and you can absolutely put, like, from my point of view, for recreational drugs, if people are educated, properly educated about it, don't go fooling yourself that these things aren't harmful. Cannabis is very harmful, but so is everything else. So are the stuff that's legal, like tobacco and alcohol, right? As long as you're educating people, as far as I'm concerned, whatever, you know, make sure there are laws in place, which means you cannot be in charge of children or machinery or anything like that whilst you're under the influence. Make sure people are educated as to, if they take some, how long it is going to be before they can do these things. Other than that, I'm fine with it. But the bottom line is, it's not a vote winner. And do you know what? It's also not a priority. It's not a big deal. You know, if it remained illegal for 100 years, in return for us getting important things done in government, fine. People don't need it for recreational users. People don't need any drug for recreational users. Do I think COVID has actually broken out in North Korea, or it's just their propaganda? Who pissing knows? I do notice, you know, the porky one has been, Kim Jong-un has been saying it's the fault of corrupt bureaucracy and or incompetent bureaucracy in hospitals or something. He's blaming other people, of course, which basically sounds to me like someone's getting their head chopped off or fed to the dogs. But I had no idea what happens in North Korea. The only things that I can know for certain happen in North Korea is when we detect it on the Richter scale. That's all. Don't know anything else. I think sometimes, you know, Kim Jong-un just gets pissed off when no one's paying attention to him. I think he's like a toddler in need of attention. Like at the moment, Russia's grabbing all the headlines. So then Kim Jong-un says, right, we'll better have another nuclear test. You know, remind them we're still here. Because everyone's ignoring them. Doesn't like it. You say you're not a fan of Sir Saintly Starmer. He made 10 pledges then broke them all. He hasn't broken a single one, mate. He hasn't broken a single one. I could go through them all now, but we have only got 8 minutes, which isn't enough time for me to go through all of them. But anyway, alcohol is the most devastating drug legally available. Well, in this country, maybe. We did used to, though. I don't know how many people know. Like, well, if you ever read Sherlock Holmes, you may know. Pretty much anything was legal in this country. In fact, in Victorian England, I suppose the whole of Britain really, but certainly in London, you could go to the chemist or the apothecary, and you could buy a heroin gift set. You know, like you go into Marks and Spencer's and buy a bath gift set for Christmas. You could go in and get yourself a little heroin gift set for someone. No problem at all. No problem. But even then, they sort of knew it wasn't good for you, because in the Sherlock Holmes stories, Dr. Watson was always very disapproving when Holmes was shooting up. But anyway, smoking kills more. Well, things like when people say such and such kills more, it's like if a drug is legal, it's going to kill more than a drug that's not legal because more people take it. But it also doesn't matter. It can be true that some drugs that are legal can be worse than some that are illegal, and it's like, you know, but it is just one of those things. At the end of the day, if tobacco was only just discovered now, it wouldn't be made legal. You know, a lot of what is legal and what is not legal, some of it is based on sound reasoning. An awful lot of it is just based on culture. It's really just based on culture. You know, Coca-Cola used to have cocaine, yeah. Yes. But anyway, you could buy opium-based drugs in 1950s. Well, you could still make it now if you really, you know, wanted to. It wouldn't be legal, but still. But yeah, I mean, these things, you know, laws change all the time. And I've got, do you know what? I've got no doubt that a lot of what we'd call soft drugs will be legalised in time. You know, I think at the moment we're going down a more conservative path, obviously, in this country, because, but ultimately, you think in this country, why are we going down a more conservative path? Because they weren't sufficiently opposed. This was the major failing of Labour. We failed to appoint leaders who could robustly oppose it. That's ultimately it. We picked the wrong leaders. The previous 3 leaders were no good. I wouldn't argue that the current one is great either. I might argue that there wasn't a clearly superior choice. And in terms of the choice we actually got as members, there wasn't a superior choice or even an equal choice. But, you know, but Starmer may do better now because of the passage. I don't think Starmer would have won the 2015 general election. If we'd have had someone like Starmer instead of Ed Miliband, I don't think he'd have done any better. Like if we had Ed Miliband now, I think Ed Miliband would do as well as Starmer. But, you know, that's not the highest bar. But again, this is another problem with, I was discussing it in a video, I can't remember when, it may have even been today. No, it wasn't, it was earlier. About the problem with party politics. It's like where and this arguably, I don't know whether this is better or worse in first past the post, but where you've got a really safe seat, it's in your interest to get a crap candidate, like a weak one, someone who just does as they're told. The problem then is you restrict your pool for leaders. It's like you need just enough superstars to form your leadership team, but you want the rest of them to just do as they're told. That's how the party machine works. But it's not, you know, it doesn't help you get the best people, because if you've only got 200 to 300 MPs, the chances of one of them being really amazing, an amazing leadership material, is not that high. Smoking used to be prescribed for asthma. Yeah, I can. I didn't actually know that, but I can guess how that went. I reckon a load of tobacco companies paid a load of doctors to say, you know, this will clear their airways. You know, why don't you recommend this? Could and would Labour scrap tuition fees? They could, of course they could, if they were in government. They'd have to have a strong majority for it, though. If you're asking me, if a minority Labour government or a Labour government that needed support of the Lib Dems, would they scrap tuition fees? I would suspect not. I'll tell you what I would do. For me, I would use the opportunity to increase social mobility, because here's what you could do, right? You could keep tuition fees, but you could say that anyone from that was studying particular subjects at particular universities, without trying to be too elitist, but I mean the ones who turn out good quality graduates, for the ones we're desperately short of, say that they will, their tuition fees will be covered by the state, and that they will get a proper living bursary as well. In return, so the way I would do it is this: you could do it like a loan type agreement. So you could say that the state will fund it, right? But you're in debt to the state. But for every year that you are economically active in the UK, in other words, you're living and working in the UK, 10% gets knocked off. You don't pay any back, 10% gets knocked off. You know, and after 10 years, then you'll start paying it back like a student loan, all right, under the normal conditions, right? But of course, if you've stayed in the UK and worked in the UK for all that time, so it basically stops people taking advantage and going abroad, right? So after 10 years, if you've lived and worked in the UK for those 10 years after you graduated, you don't pay anything, but it's all cancelled. So you could do it like that. That way, people from poorer backgrounds will be motivated to do the university courses that we're most short of. You could even have little bursaries for people studying those same subjects at A level. For engineering or medical degrees, things like that, nursing. Just think about all the graduates we're really short of, and just think. So we'll make sure that their tuition is free and that they get a decent cost of living grant as well. And then you could keep tuition fees in for others and use tuition fees then, because you could just scrap the whole thing, we can afford it, but you could use tuition fees to funnel people into doing degrees that we need, really. I have a weak MP where I live. She does as PM suggests and receives a decent salary and great pension when she retires for nodding her head when required. I mean, the thing is, that's the party machine. That's what they want. That is what they want. And at the end of the day, there's no good system. I was going to say there's no perfect system. There's not even a good system. If you got rid of the party system, right, then you wouldn't be able to have much coordinated effort. It'd be really difficult, because it'd be constantly horse trading to get every bit of legislation through. So it's really, whatever political system you come up with, there's always downsides. Should university places be reduced to make scrapping tuition fees more affordable? See, that's the thing. I mean, we had this idea that we wanted more people to get degrees. My view is, and again, I try and avoid sounding elitist because I've got a degree. We don't need half the population to have a degree, do we? But it depends what you see a degree as. Like, I see a degree as part of training for a career, right? Now, Tony Blair took a different view, which is fair enough. He took the view that it taught you skills that are useful, critical thinking, things like that, which is fair enough. You can take that view. I think that's a perfectly valid view, in which case, yes, we should encourage more people to do them. But then I just think to myself, but then we don't have enough electricians or plumbers out like that, you know. But we also don't have enough graduates of things you need to go to university for. We don't have enough nurses. We don't have enough doctors. We're desperately short of engineers. And so I would just say, and this will have to be my final point, I'm afraid, because we're running out of time. I would just say, look, keep tuition fees. If I was Prime Minister and I had a government that, if I had a parliament that would do as I said, I would say, keep them, but scrap them for any, I would identify courses that churn out graduates that we need, and I would say, we will give you the money to cover your tuition fees and your cost of living. I would give them a separate bursary as well, which is just theirs. But in terms of the tuition fees and the cost of living, which you now get as loans anyway, so it's like you still get your loan out, you still arrange your loan. But if you do these certain degrees, you do not, no matter what you earn, you do not pay a penny back for 10 years. But for every year that you are living and working in the UK, 10% gets knocked off. And the interest doesn't accrue, which it doesn't anyway. So after 10 years, so if basically what happens is, if you work for 5 years in the UK, but then you emigrate to Australia or something and you spend the rest of your life there, you will have to pay 50% of it back, is how it will work. That's how I would do it. But anyway, we've come to the end of that. We'll be back on again next week. And for the upper tier of members, I will put out a thing for Wednesday as well. I'll try and remember to do it for tomorrow, but other than that, it'll be out on Friday. Thanks for coming on, everyone. And until next time, I'll see you later.